John Calvin. Just say the name. For over 400 years, it sparked both passionate devotion and, well, equally passionate disdain. He's one of history's most influential figures, for sure, but also one of its most misunderstood. So today, we're going to try to peel back all those layers of myth and get to the actual man.
So, yeah, let's dive right in. Because when you start looking at the historical record, you're faced with a genuine puzzle. Who was this person really? It kind of feels like we're dealing with a shapeshifter, this historical enigma that's just been wrapped in centuries and centuries of controversy.
And this right here perfectly illustrates the problem. I mean, how can one person be described in such wildly opposite terms? A psychopathic persecutor and the father of democracy? The tyrant of Geneva and a radical opponent of tyranny? It just doesn't add up. So to solve this, we have to start by separating the man from the movement that got named after him.
All right, so our first step is to tackle that very word, Calvinism. This one term is at the root of so much of the confusion, and as you're about to see, it's a label Calvin himself would have absolutely rejected. You see, the term Calvinism is, to put it mildly, just really misleading. Calvin never set out to create an ism. It's not like Martin Luther with Lutheranism. In fact, he actively fought against the whole idea of a movement that was centered on him.
And this quote gets right to the heart of it. He really discouraged any kind of celebrity. I mean, think about it. You can go visit Martin Luther's grave today in Wittenberg, but John Calvin's grave, nobody knows where it is. He made sure of that, specifically to stop any kind of personality cult from forming after he died.
And over the centuries, that label has become so flexible, so plastic, that it's been stretched to cover groups and ideas the historical Calvin would have found just bizarre. The idea of a Calvinist Baptist in his time, that would have completely blown his mind.
So that brings us to our next point. The myth of Calvin as this lone theological genius, well, it's just that, a myth. He was a hugely important player on a team, but he was not the whole team.
From the very beginning, the Reformed faith had a ton of different voices. You had these absolute giants like Zwingli in Zurich, and Bucer in Strasbourg, and Heinrich Bullinger, who you could argue was just as important as Calvin back in the day. Calvin wasn't working in a vacuum. He was in a constant, lively debate with all these other brilliant thinkers.
And, modern scholarship is really clear on this now. The popular idea of Calvin as this single, all-powerful founder has been completely debunked. A much, much better way to see him is as first among equals. A profoundly influential voice? For sure, but one voice among many.
Okay, so we've separated him from the ism and we've put him back in his peer group. So now we can finally ask, who was John Calvin, the actual person? And the answer is complicated.
And let's be totally clear here. We can't ignore the harsh side of his personality. The source material doesn't pull any punches. He was difficult, he was driven by this powerful sense that he was intellectually superior, and he just could not handle it when people disagreed with him. That self-certainty ended a lot of friendships.
This is such a powerful quote because it forces us to deal with the man as he actually was. There's no secret, softer version of Calvin hiding in some archive somewhere. We have to accept the flawed, difficult prophet that he was. But, and this is a huge but, that's not the whole story. For all his flaws, he was also incredibly charismatic. He had this rare genius for taking really complex theological ideas and explaining them with a clarity that was just astonishing, especially in such a chaotic time.
And this right here really gets to the heart of what made him so important. See, Calvin wasn't the fire-breathing revolutionary like Luther who just broke everything open. He came next. He was the great organizer. He took all these radical new ideas that were flying around and gave them structure, stability, and a system people could actually follow and replicate. And his influence didn't spread through armies or political power. It spread through the power of the printing press. His writings, especially his masterpiece, The Institutes, were absolute bestsellers. He almost single-handedly turned the city of Geneva from a relative backwater into one of the most important printing centers in all of Europe.
Which brings us to our final section. How did the ideas of this one difficult, brilliant organizer from Geneva create such a sprawling, diverse, and, often contradictory legacy all over the world?
Well, the key was adaptability. Calvin never wanted Geneva to be a new Rome, some central headquarters dictating beliefs and practices for everyone. He actually encouraged local churches to adapt to their own situations, and that decision allowed the tradition to grow and change in ways he never could have seen coming.
And this adaptability led to what the source calls a kaleidoscopic legacy. I mean, his ideas shaped politics in Scotland and inspired the Puritans who founded New England, but they were also twisted to justify apartheid in South Africa. And today they're a huge vital religious force in modern South Korea. It's a legacy that is just all over the map.
And this finally brings us full circle, back to that puzzle we started with. The reason for all the contradictions is that Calvinism became something so much bigger, so much more complex, and so much more varied than John Calvin himself ever could have imagined or controlled. The legacy totally outgrew the man.
Ultimately, Calvin's story is just a powerful, fascinating reminder that once ideas are released out into the world, they really do take on a life of their own. It leaves us with this incredible question. How does one person's life, their specific writings, their specific actions, spark a global legacy so vast and so varied that it completely escapes their own control?